All right. Good afternoon, morning, or evening, whenever it is you're listening to this and or watching this. Welcome back. This is season 2 of Fill with Purpose. As you can see, I did have a different guest here today. It's not Nicole. This is Ken, and Ken and I will talk here in a little bit. But Nicole has decided to pass on this season because she has many commitments already, and so we're going to miss you, Nicole. You were a big contributor to this, but we're going to keep Fill with Purpose going because I see that there could be value, and there's value in what we're doing with this. So what is Fill with Purpose? Fill with Purpose is it's a life approach, really is what it is. It's a way to look at life through a biblical lens with biblical principles. These 3 visuals that we created are going to help us in our approach. And then we also have I have just created the concept, the idea of like a work group, purpose groups, kind of like small groups, and talking through your strategy and your circle of congruence and your sweet spot with a group of people. And then there's workshops coming up. I actually have one coming up on February 24, and then one in March as well at a couple different churches that we're going to talk about these concepts and this approach called Fill with Purpose. And one of the elements of Fill with Purpose is this podcast. And my hope is, what I vision with this is that we meet with people such as Ken or go through the phone. We have people come on and they talk about their life approach, their strategy, we talk about the Fill with Purpose life approach. And we talk about these concepts with our guest. And in this case, it's Ken. Ken I work with at one of the hardware stores in town. And just appreciate you being here, Ken.
You're welcome.
And so we're going to just get started here. First of all, let's talk about the first approach up here is the Circle of Congruence. So it is just basic. It's a visual. It's not something to write on or anything like that. Your strategy is, but the Circle of Congruence is a way to look at life and how you spend your time, your energy, your resources, and balance that and have congruence in that. And so, as you can see, unless you're driving right now, please don't be looking if you're just listening. But this is a 3-circle model with each circle getting a little bit bigger than the others. And within this circle, my conviction is I'm a follower of Jesus and a Christian, and I believe that is best if God is present in all of our and everything that we're doing and how we're spending our time and our resources and our energy. So within these 3 circles, God is at the center of all these things. And there needs to be a balance between how much time we spend by ourselves, that's in time of meditation, prayer, that sort of thing, just watching a show by ourselves, and then spending time with our family, and then spending time focused on others. And I suggest that it's really super important that all of us have a balance in this, a congruence in this, but it's going to be different for everybody. Ken's is going to be different than mine, than Nicole's, than yours, than everybody else. But everybody needs to be spending time in each one of these categories for a particular amount of time. So, Ken's ideal congruence would be in others maybe 40% of the time. And for me, it may be 50% of the time. And then the me category, some people don't like to be by themselves, but it's important to just spend time and energy on, improving and reflecting on our life and working on ourselves. So, maybe that's 10% for me and 50% of the time for Ken. So, Ken, with this description, and also the word eternity is up in mind, is up there at the very top right-hand corner. How we spend our time here on earth does matter for eternity. I mean, that impacts, when our lives here on this earth end, how we spent this time does matter, where, heaven or hell. And then, how many, the Bible talks about crowns and that we will have and be given depending on how we spend our time here on earth. So, Ken, just curious with what I described with the Circle of Congruence, What's your preference? And are you one that's a little more outward, others focused, or are you a little more me focused, family focused? And then do you need to adjust that congruence and that balance in your life at all?
Well, looking at this chart, it's kind of like probably I am out of balance. I am a very solitary person. But at the same time, I think most of my effort tends to be directed towards others. I probably for a good portion of my life, I've been suffering from depression. And one of the little, negative self-talk things that goes through my head is a lot of times this is, I don't matter. But at some point that actually, I realized there's a certain freedom in that. That realizing you don't matter means you can spend, it's like other people do matter. And where I need to learn is, and I'm in a process of learning is things take care of themselves. Now that doesn't mean that people aren't draining along, I basically work in the service industry. I have for a long time. I've been a substitute teacher. I've taught at a small college, and it's like these are very people-oriented things. Mm-hmm. It's like at the end of the day, it's like just go home, book, read, pet the cat. Sometimes even spending time with a cat or a dog is too draining. But it's that, and it goes back to God's message for us. It's like it's what I get a lot from my readings is that God wants us to set ourselves aside a little bit and not worry about ourselves, because things will take care of themselves if we're taking care of everyone else.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is selflessness, right? That's preached very, very much so in the Bible. It's being selfless is what God has in store for us.
Right, and it's that. If basically as Christians, if we take care of everybody, like that old saying, "Bread on the water," it will come back to us. Now, mind you, it's God's will, not ours. The Bible is full of stories where God basically says, nope, this is what I want you to do. This is what you're going to do.
So would you say, with this design, this visual, so you're saying you probably spend a little too much time in the me category and not enough time in the others? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying is sometimes I'm spending a lot of time in the other category, but occasionally I find myself worrying too much about me. And that's where I get discouraged. It's not like, what hurts isn't so much that I don't matter. It's that thought in the back of my head that I should.
Okay.
And, and it's like when things aren't going my way or I'm not getting what I want. And so I'm going to say it, the life I live is oriented more towards my family and others. But there's a little part of me, that little selfish part of me that is kind of, gets angry because things aren't turning out the way I want them to.
Yeah.
And so my struggle is just sometimes, I don't necessarily want to say that it's God's plan, but it's the way God's plan shaped the world around me. And I don't know what God wants for me. It'd help if I knew what God wanted for me. But it's like, I'm just going in, and it's when I accept my circumstance, I feel better. And when I accept my circumstance is when I'm other focused.
And you're probably less depressed then. or does not really impact that?
I don't notice it. I'm going to say that's more a case of it. It's 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 like right now. It's my depression isn't focused so much in sadness. It's kind of that loss of motivation
Yeah,
and joy.
sure.
But yeah, I basically when I feel joy is when I get lost, and when I get lost, it's usually when I'm
Have a purpose?
doing something other directed.
Yeah, for sure. So just for the sake of time, I'm want to move on to the sweet spot as well. But the whole introvert piece. Maybe you already know this, but I've learned this over time. I'm actually, even though people call me outgoing, and I'm an outgoing person, I'm actually naturally an introvert. And how that works is, and maybe you already know this, but for maybe listeners that have never heard this before, an introvert is how you recharge. They determine if you're an introvert or an extrovert based on how you recharge. So if people are draining to you, you're probably an introvert. If people give you more energy, being around people and focused on others, then you're probably an extrovert. And so that's where the Lord made us all differently. So that's why I said it's going to, for everybody, our balance on the Circle of Congruence is going to be different based on the way we're made. Again, it's all, under, God, we're always in the presence of God, and we want to acknowledge that and always continue to think about that. But we're going to be different. There's some people that are really like to just sit and read a book but maybe they need to be in the others, maybe focus a little bit more on others, and that would actually bring a little bit of satisfaction. And maybe some people need to spend a little more time by themselves. And So, and then with their family, of course, we cannot neglect our families. I mean, they're the people closest to us and who we live with, oftentimes. And if we're neglecting them and not having a balance there, that's going to throw the whole congruence off kilter. So.
Right. Well, it's basically going back to the introvert thing. It's the term is social introvert. Everyone thinks introvert. If you're an introvert, you're shy. You're not necessarily shy, because you can be social, and it's just that social activity drains you.
Right.
And then there's not only your family, but there's the family you're born to, but there's also the family you choose.
Yeah.
In many cases, that family is going to be within your church.
Yeah, right. And I want to point one word out on this, a focus of our time, energy, and resources. So we didn't really talk about that, but that includes our money. That includes, if we're always only spending money on ourselves, or only spending money on ourselves and our family, but not, on others and entrepreneurial, type activities or charity, then that makes a difference too. That's not a congruence. We need to be, balanced in how we focus our resources as well. All right. So the next visual there, Ken. Now, Ken said he didn't look this up before he didn't go to our website. So he is actually learning right now what these visuals are. So that's partly why I'm describing it, partly because maybe you've never heard of these visuals, our listeners today. So this is a second visual that isn't really interactive. It's where you actually write on it. This is just more of a something to glean from, and this is your sweet spot, and it's finding your sweet spot. So if you are able to look at this, you can see in the very center of the sweet spot is your purpose. We all have a purpose in life, or purposes in life that God has given. Like Ken just talked about how sometimes he's essentially struggles with maybe knowing what his purpose is, depending on the situation, depending on people, and whether or not God has purpose for him. I mean, essentially, it's kind of what I'm gleaning from that, and maybe that's not where you're at or not, but God knows how many hairs are on your head, so He absolutely does care about you, and I think that conceptually, probably. I would hope so, and He does. But I understand too. You're trying to balance out, and I think it's a good thing. You're trying to balance out that God cares for me. He loves me more than, He takes care of the crow. He takes care of the birds, and makes sure they're well fed and all that. And He cares for me. but yet he also cares for me enough to not focus, that I should focus all my attention on myself, that I need to be, loving others and be selfless. And that's what God has in store for us. So anyway, going back to the sweet spot. So each and every one of us, Ken, me, you, our listener, we are uniquely created by God with certain personality traits, certain passions. And you can see the list up there. Certain creativity. The Lord just made us that way, and because He's a creative God. And then He, in the way He created us, we all see the needs around us uniquely. I mean, I may see something that breaks my heart that Ken's like, well, yeah, that's awful, but it doesn't break my heart like it breaks yours, Phil. And then maybe something you as a listener, you're like, that breaks your heart, but doesn't really break mine or Ken's. But it does yours, so you're going to do something about it. So, God has created us all uniquely in how we see things around us. And then He's also given us unique opportunities. Every single person, He has given unique opportunities and open doors, as the sweet spot says. So when you take those three categories, you can find your purpose, your sweet spot in that lens. So Ken, how does this resonate with you, this visual?
Oh, kind of wish you had a handout.
I know. I thought about that too.
I'm saying here, it's
for our listeners, it's hard to see it up here just because that was one thing that I did think to do, and then I...
right. I'm going to step away from the camera just a moment.
Sure. Does that help a little bit? No. Ken's checking things out there, the little descriptors.
Okay, I'm back. One of the things that God did is He created me very, very, very blind. The big letter E on the eye chart. Without my glasses away, in order for it to get into focus, I have to be about 3 feet away.
Wow.
Basically, what I'm going to say is I know. Trying to think of how to say this without sounding conceited. But it's other people keep telling me this. It's basically growing up, and to this day, I'm the smart kid. And it's on top.
Smart Alec or no?
Yes. Actually gets to both. But it's basically, sense of humor developed because of, basically as a defense mechanism. But it's like I'm the kid who reads the books. The T-shirt from the Game of Thrones. I read and I know things. But on top of that, I put things together. I read a book on naval history, and I can take lessons to that to apply to regular life. My background is in vertebrate paleontology, and they had an economist talking about why successful companies fail, and it's like, hey, that might be an explanation for mass extinction. And so things like that. I'm kind of a troubleshooter. And people come to me for help. And so that's basically, I think, what God, my talents.
That's how He's created you, right? The top one there, uniquely created.
He uniquely created me to, be a problem solver. And that puts me into a position where basically now that is the role He has for me, is to solve problems. Not necessarily my problems, though.
Yeah, right.
It's that's directed outward.
But that gives you purpose. That gives you a direction.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what my purpose is. And it's not so much, and I mentioned, I kind of wonder what God's plan is for me. I know it's how I fit into God's plan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's accepting the fact, and it's like an everyday struggle, accepting the fact that I am a tool for God to accomplish this in the world.
Yeah.
It's my church Lent several years ago had this passed out this book about practicing, and one of the things he mentioned in there was work, and you have to treat work as prayer. And it's simply that. I'm in the service industry. Everything I do is I'm basically a person comes into our store with a problem, and I am finding solutions for those problems. Yeah. When I was earning commission, I never once cared about how much I was going to make on the product I was trying to sell. I'm trying to find a product that's going to work for that customer.
Yeah, that's great.
At the end of the day, it worked out for me. You know, I got a paycheck.
Yep.
And it was usually what I needed.
And I just want to make this little side note. That's such a blessing when your job can fit with how you were uniquely created. I mean, working in a hardware store. That's what when we think about people working in hardware stores, they should hopefully be able to help people solve problems and create solutions. And that works out. So God bless hardware, for the having hardware stores. But then, hopefully everybody, and I really think that can live out their passions in their vocation as well.
Right. Well, and it's like it goes back to work as prayer. That's one of the things I learned at work was, it's part of the prayer process. And, you're praying, when you pray, you're talking with God. And what I heard back from God is this is what you're supposed to be doing. This is why you're doing it. It's, a waiter and a cook in a restaurant. They're feeding people.
Right. Yeah, making people happy by
their
bellies.
Yeah, their feet. You could say they're making them happy, the meal, but I mean, in the long run, they're doing exactly what God asks us to do: feed the hungry. If you work in a clothing store, you're clothing the naked.
Right.
And if you concentrate on helping the customer find what they need. Sometimes it's even you're finding what they need. You don't want to find what you want. When I sold electronics in retail, they divide things up into good, better, best. I was really bad at selling the best. I was well below standard on the best, but I was also well below on the good. I was getting people into that better category because a lot of times they didn't need the best stuff. They wanted the best stuff because it's the best, but that thing in the middle is what suited their needs. Yep. They wanted a video camera to attach to their bow when they're hunting. Well, a DVD camera is the coolest, neatest thing, but this is back in the days when we had the Discman, and they were all bragging about how they had skip control and whatnot. And I said, you let that bow go, you're going to, what you want is this tape camera. Yes, it's not as fancy, it's not as cool, but it's not going to be affected by shooting the bow.
Yeah, you're aging yourself a little bit right now.
No. My hair,
So just again, for the sake of time, this is just a synopsis of finding your sweet spot that we've talked about with Ken today. But again, you are uniquely created. You have been given unique opportunities like experiences, and you've been given unique open doors, essentially, and opportunities. When you put all those things together and you think about those things, and when you're in your me time, in your circle, and you're in your praying. By the way, you don't have to be a Christian to be a part of this filled with purpose approach. If you're not a follower of Jesus like I am, that's not a requirement. But that's just who I am, and it's my conviction. So that's why that's why the approach includes these biblical principles. But anyway, back to what I'm saying here. If you reflect on those things, maybe it can help you even in the next step here that we're going to put up here. The strategy. So now, Ken, just so you know what this is all about, this is called the strategy, and this is the interactive piece. This is the piece that you actually write down on, on this paper right here. You can print it off. It's on our on the Fill with Purpose website. And then you can print that off and actually create your own goals and action steps to reaching your strategy. But what a strategy is, again, you're finding your sweet spot can help you build your strategy, by the way. But what a strategy is, it's bottom line strategy defined as the art of war. If you look at like the root meaning of strategy, strategio, it means the art of war. Life is a battle. It's war, not necessarily with guns and fists and knives, but it's a battle as far as there's a spiritual element of it. There's definitely a spiritual war going on, but also just us in our lives. Life is not easy. If it is, I would question that. But it's every day can be sometimes a battle against depression, against our spouse or somebody we're working with, or it can feel like a battle. And so we need to go in with that mindset of, okay, I'm gonna fight this war, not with mean words and not in that way, but I'm gonna be strong. I'm gonna be selfless. I'm gonna be I'm gonna overcome these things. And then part of that, so in creating your strategy, that can help you in those things. So you could have as many goals as you want. There can be too many goals, but it depends on the person. You can have the few, just one or two goals, but that can maybe be not enough. But so like for example, I have my strategy here. You can see my chicken scratch. I'm a terrible handwriter, but I have written up here at the very top, my motivation. My motivation is to glorify the name of Jesus. My overall life motivation. That's what I want to do in life. If I feel like I'm doing my big why, like what's the why for my life, the purpose for my life, and then I've created a strategy like I want to make a broad impact in helping people. So then I have these action steps. So that's my first one on the left-hand side there. So I have these action steps in connecting with people. This platform right here. The next one down, the next little triangle down, it says grow the tax base in my county. I have a passion for that. I'm on the county board in Oceana County, and I want to help with workforce and housing. So those are some strategies in growing the tax base and where I live. And so anyway, and then there's some core life principles up on the right-hand side. Like, what are some things that I cannot compromise on? They're non-negotiables that I'm going to live out so that I'm not compromised, or I can actually fulfill my goals. So, for example, the loving my family, seeking to impress no one. That's a temptation for me, is to impress people, and I don't want that to be my motivation. I want it to be to glorify Jesus. So that works against me when I try to seek people or to impress people. Don't let my anxiety. I struggle with anxiety, so don't let that paralyze me. And then also making sure you take time for leisure. There's a leisure section on there in the bottom right. That I know for you, it's Dungeons and Dragons. You like to do that for leisure and read,
among other things.
Yeah, right. So what would you say, Ken? This is a strategy. This is something that you actually take time to think through. What are some life goals? If maybe you haven't had enough time to really think through this, but in these goals, by the way, they can be 1 week goals. They can be 10-year goals. They, probably a good variety, a good balance of time spans in those goals is probably best anyway, because we should be looking really far ahead and also looking a week ahead. So, what would you, what do you think of all this?
Well, one of the things that popped into my mind while you were talking about strategy, and you mentioned, it's based on gospel, but you don't necessarily need to be a Christian or even religious. What a lot of people forget, even if you're going to, deny the divinity of God and the religious aspects of it, Jesus Christ is probably one of the greatest moral philosophers ever. And it's so, yeah, you can take inspiration, if you're not going to take inspiration spiritually from it, you can still look at it as great life advice. And, it's probably the strategy I work on every day. And if you don't mind, I'm going to flip to into the Bible. And it's Matthew 5, and it's verse 44 on, and it says, "But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your heavenly Father, for he makes his sun rise on the bad and the good, and causes rain to fall on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what recompense will you have? Do not the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brothers only, what is unusual about that? Do not the pagans do the same? So be perfect, just as your heavenly Father is perfect." And that's every day. You have to go in, and people are people. No matter what your belief in God or not God, or your convictions on what is just and unjust, you have to go in and treat every individual as a person with dignity, just as God does. The thing that I need to remind myself is the opposite of peace is not necessarily war. It's conflict. And so you have to, basically, if you want peace, you need to avoid conflict. And I'm going to say right now, I think I do a fairly decent job with the conflict with others. Conflict inside, different story. I'm going to have to download this, and that was okay. And I'm here on your show. And
Filled with Purpose.
Filled with Purpose. It's like,
no, that's a good advertisement.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's fillwithpurpose.com. Well, one of the things is among my official diagnosis is ADD with depression, or I guess it's now ADHD with depression, but I don't have the H. And so it's like things go in my head, and some things get caught from in my short-term memory into long-term memory. Some things just go right out the buffer.
Yeah. Well, and that's what, writing these things down keeps, for when we forget, sometimes it's forgotten if we don't write things down. So that's why that's so important. And then the work groups the focus groups that I talked about, the purpose groups, then if you meet with somebody, if you fill out a strategy and then you actually meet with people, and talk about your strategy once a week, once a month, whatever, time period, and talk about, our congruence, and talk about our sweet spot, and how we're doing with those things, man, I feel like it's could really make a difference in the lives of people. But yeah, definitely, I'm putting you on the spot because you haven't really reflected on these at all. So as far as goals go, but does one just come to mind right now, like whether it's a 10-year goal, whether it's a 1 week goal that will help you live with your strategy and live with a purpose?
Actually, I'm going to say, yeah. It's a short-term goal is definitely going to be going in and getting back into counseling of some variety.
Okay. Yep.
And a short-term goal I've actually picked up and I'm working on right now is I'm actually went and bought the Catholic lectionary for the year, and I'm going through and I'm reading the daily readings.
Nice.
And, it's the nice thing is it gives me something to reflect on.
Sure.
And again, if, it's like a verse from the Bible or self-help, as you go, we are creations of God, and just about everything that goes through our head has at least some connection to God.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can find truth everywhere. But I'm finding that this is a purposefully doing a reading is many times will give me something to reflect on, because there'll be something in there that I have to go, hey, yeah, and it sparks a connection. And, another thing I'm going to, you got your chicken scratch up here. One thing I'm going to also suggest, if you get one of these charts, do it in hand, by hand. I know everyone likes to do everything but computers, but
versus like this.
Right.
Yeah.
You can do it as a PDF and fill it in that way.
Yeah.
You actually do build better connections with what you're writing when you're doing it in handwriting. And it's going to stick with you more.
Yep. Absolutely.
I learned that in college. I wrote the world's most detailed notes that I never looked at again.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So tell me one core life principle that if you have one in mind, like something that's a non-negotiable that you cannot, you cannot cross that bridge, or else if you do, that's going to totally throw your strategy out the window, or maybe not totally, but it's going to hurt your strategy. Do you have one in mind? And again, I'm putting you on the spot.
I know. I'm going through and reflecting. I want to say it's not treating people with dignity.
Or so you're saying treating people with dignity is your core principle.
My core principle is treating people with dignity.
Yeah. Okay.
And the reason I'm going to go to hell is because you get that bad experience with a customer, and I imagine winning the lotto, finding out where they work, buying the company, and closing it down just because he's a jerk. And it's like, it's like, I don't know what's going on. Maybe that person is a jerk. Maybe they're having a bad day, but even jerks need to be treated with, and it's like that thing. It's that's a line I cross all the time.
Sure.
But it's a line. But it's a line I have to go in, and it's like, it's really, really hard when people, to treat people with dignity when they're walking around saying, with signs they're saying, treat me like I'm a jerk because I'm a jerk.
Right. Yeah. So how about an item of leisure? So I brought up Dungeons and Dragons, but what's something that you would write down?
Actually, leisure sometimes, that's less leisure. That's another word job.
Okay.
Actually, probably the thing that my leisure activity that I get the most benefit from is going to be just gathering knowledge.
Oh.
Reading. My current struggle is not spending so much time on YouTube, but if I am on YouTube, I'm watching history, I'm watching science. I'm learning something. Dungeons and Dragons. You'd be surprised you could get a lot of life knowledge from Dungeons and Dragons. It's basically, I think, that just sitting someplace with a book, whether even nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
People who read fiction tend to be more empathetic.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
that makes sense.
It's not a waste of time.
Sure. All right. Well, just again, for the sake of time, Ken, I appreciate you being a part of this. I've really enjoyed being with you today.
Well, I hope
through this.
Hopefully I didn't mess it up too bad.
No, I think you did great. And so this is really, for our listeners, this is what I envision, to go through somebody's strategy, whether that's you or somebody that would want to just talk through their strategy or just get to learn this concept a little bit, the way this works, through their sweet spot, through their circle of congruence, and so forth. And again, it's going to be most effective if you're doing this in a group of people. But this is the idea of what the podcast is all about. It may not be 40 minutes with one person. It may be 10 minutes talking just about somebody's strategy, and you want to go over one goal, or you need some direction. I would love to be there for you and help you in that. So reach out to me via email. You don't have to be here in person either. It could be via, like if you live in Illinois or some other state, we could Zoom you in, or we could actually hook you up on a cell phone. and do it that way as well. But the first Thursday of the month for until June or through June is what we're doing. This is what we're doing for season 2, just like we did today. And yeah, appreciate again, Ken, that you're here. And just
My pleasure.
And then the whole concept of the faith element of this. I do. The reason I'm sharing this, my convictions with you, because I think that's the best for everyone, because it has an eternal impact. But yeah, just you don't have to be a Christian to use these visuals. You can also reflect on it. I think it's better to not be reflecting on these things, even if you're not a Christian. But I do hope that it's something that everyone comes to know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. But anyway, we'll catch you next time, which is the first Thursday of the month in March. I think it's March 7th. And I'm looking forward to spending some time with my next guest. All right, have a great month of February.
Have a good one.